Ladies and gentlemen, great to be with you today. I'm John Wheaton, your host of the Creating Structure podcast. Back with you again today, my esteemed guest, Mr. Tom O'Malley, managing partner, Clover Architectural Products. Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, John. I'm very excited to be on, and it's great. I've listened to a lot of your shows, and it's fun. I'm looking forward to this, and it'll be always a little nervous doing any type of live audio, but you make it seem real seamless. So thanks for thinking enough of me to have me on.
Well, thanks for thinking enough of me. Thanks for that, and thinking enough of me to share your time. You know, you were on my list for quite a while. I have a long list, and it was the meeting we had a couple of weeks ago where we were kind of introducing our teams to each other. I'm like, why haven't I yet followed through with Tom? So thanks for that quick response. You know, as on the podcast, often things happen a little more organically than many might assume. So that's the great way. You look great. It's good to have you. You know, you're really well known because you're out there. Your name is out there, and I think you're pretty well known in the industry. But there will be many on this podcast that don't know who you are because we have a reasonably broad listening audience. So let's get into it. Tell us who you are, where you're from, where you come from, where you went to school, how you got where you got. Let's just get into it.
Sure. So I grew up in Orland Park, Illinois, which is southwest suburbs. One of your previous guests, there are two of them, Kevin Carey and Dan Shields, I'm older than both of them, so I didn't know them then back in the day. But so I grew up there. I went to high school in the city in Marist High School, which is just inside the city boundary, and had a great experience there. Got to meet kids from all over, and kind of toughened me up a little bit from my suburban days. But from there, I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, and I loved it down there. It's a beautiful campus. Again, met people from all over the country. It's got a lot of great programs, and it attracts people from all over the Midwest, but also from the East Coast, the West Coast, and so that was great. And so I was 4 years away there, and then I came back to the Chicagoland, and from there, my first job I got from my first full-time job was I was in my friend's backyard, and we were shooting hoops. It was a man night. His dad had told his son he could have all his buddies over, and he had some friends over, and he asked what I was looking to do. I'm like, well, I'd like to work in sports. So it was Mike Sheehan, who is the sheriff of Cook County. He said, Skinny, come here. Tom wants to work in sports, and Skinny ran special events for the city, and the World Cup was coming to Chicago. And the next thing I knew, I had an interview, and I was working for the mayor's office of special events, and primarily just on the World Cup. So I worked for a special host committee, and I did that for a year, and it was great. I loved it. I got to meet the who's who of Chicago's elite, because they were all on the host committee, and I played soccer in high school, and so it was kind of fun to be part of that. And it was the opening games in Chicago, and one of my fun things is I made we tried to think of different things to do in the city, and I said, why don't we put all the flags of all the different countries on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, and my boss said, well, get it done, and we did. So wow. I still feel they should rename Michigan Avenue the O'Malley Bridge, but it still hasn't happened. But
yeah, come on, there's no respect there, like
respect, no.
And especially in Chicago, the O'Malley Bridge, like that would go over great.
It would. It's so much better. That was like a year contract. So when that was up, I went to work for a company called Romano Brothers Beverage, and that was I basically worked for the Gallo Wine Company. That's all we sold, and so it was kind of a training program. And I was there for a couple of years, and great experience. Gallo's known for their sales training and their so I got to do their sales training. I got to do their management training. I worked alongside one of the Gallos, and I learned how hard she worked. And I mean, she came up and she worked harder than anybody. And it taught me, like, here's someone that's gonna someday take over the family fortune. And she was out hustling everybody, and making her name, and proving her worth. And so that was great. From there, I kind of went back to, if I backtrack a little bit, my family grew up and we had a lake house up in Grand Beach, Michigan. And that's where the trainer family had a lake house. And so we knew the trainers. And in high school, my senior year, I worked after school, emptying garbage cans and, doing all those fun things for 4 hours a day. And that led to the summer job. And I ended up working 4 summers there. And so after this wine thing was going on, Bob Trainer called me and said they might have an opening. I sent him my resume to see if I was passing it around to see different people, maybe he had some friends, and he's like, hey, I think we're looking for somebody at Doralco and you'd have to travel. And so that's kind of how I jumped back into the industry. So a little bit more, I live in the western suburbs now. I see in one of your previous podcasts, you said one point you guys started on Berwyn, then your dad was in Hinsdale, which is kind of a farming town then. And so I lived one town over in Western Springs. And but I can tell you, Hinsdale is no farming town today, John. So
it's not. It's nice. It's like the place to be. And it's in Lombard. Oh, they were at Lombard. Now they're in Wheaton. And we wondered, what happened? Why couldn't I have been in the family that had the founding fathers of Wheaton, Illinois? But it's not.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been great. So that's kind of my background.
That's great. So the Trainer family, from formerly Trainer Glass, and now, of course, they're still Marty's Ventana, and they're in different spots. They had a beach house, a lake house at Grand Beach, Michigan as well. You got to know them and the family and such. And so they had some interest in Doralco, right?
Yeah. So the family members owned, in the end, it was different variations, but they owned 85% of it. And then myself, I had owned 5%. I had bought it from one of the trainers, and there's 2 other people that owned 5%. So there's 85% by the different variations of trainers.
Okay, so you went, like many I've interviewed, you had this perfectly direct path from the city of Chicago to Romano Brothers. Boom, Doralco. Okay,
right.
So somebody took it, Bob or whoever, Tim or Bob or whoever, they knew you, they liked you, they took a chance on you. What were you doing when you got to Doralco? Were you in sales? Were you a rep? Where did you start? What did you do? And how did you assimilate then into what we know as, this architectural specialties industry?
Sure. So I started as a salesman, and I was basically the national salesman. I was replacing a guy named Bill Zintarski, who was kind of moving on to do some different things. And so that was my role. And then right after I got hired, they also hired someone else, and we kind of split up the country. And I was going to do the East Coast, and he was going to do the West Coast, and that's what we did for maybe a couple of years. And I did sales, and it was a time when they had bought a company called Intertech, which was one town over from Doralco, and Intertech was known for doing gratings and grills, and it was kind of right when sunshade started getting more popular. And so Intertech had a rep network already established. So I was kind of managing some of those reps, and then, calling on other clients for, Doralco also had made rails for all glass doors. So really it was maintaining those relationships on the door side, and then kind of growing the grating grill sunshade business. And that's really what took off for Doralco is the sunshade side. The door side was good, but it grew, but not as much as the sunshade side of it.
So was there anything in your background that you knew of, or obviously you learned a lot about sales with the Gallo thing.
Yeah.
But did you know coming out of college? Did you know when you were a kid? Did you know when you were working for the mayor's office? Sales was your thing, sales was a thing, you could be, or you were good at that? Or is it something that you just migrated into?
I'd say I probably migrated into it. And I'll be honest, I I would get really nervous talking. And when I graduated, I actually went up. My mom was a teacher, and she knew I didn't stutter necessarily, but I would freeze up, and I couldn't get the word out. And then it was almost worse, at times. So she had me go meet with, she taught some other, the speech pathologists within like her school and they recommended this guy up at Northwestern. He was the chair of the program, and he was kind of retiring. So I went to his house and I met with him, and he gave me tips, and I went up there, probably all summer. I think I just started my first job, but I would go after work, and getting to Evanston, Illinois is not easy.
No,
coming from it, but the guy was great, and he really helped me. Like I'm amazed that I can get up and do a presentation, or I can do something like this. And so, yeah, I mean, going and talking in front of people is probably the farthest thing that from where I thought I'd be able to do. So, it's one of those things, I guess, if you kind of, tackle your fears, or you have people help you tackle your fears and assist you. And it was great. The guy just gave me a lot of like small things and tips. And now it doesn't even, every once in a while it'll pop up, but not often. So,
you know what, Tom, thank you for sharing that. We could adjourn the podcast right now, and I think many people would be inspired just by that story. I did not know that. That is so phenomenal. That is so great that you could. Yeah, no, I would have never guessed that. And that is a great story and I guess, my mind could run off in many directions. Like, you can conquer that mountain, you can do whatever it is you push yourself to do, and conquering your fears and stepping in out of your comfort zone. So kudos to you. We were talking the other day, we were at a little art show in our town, and we were talking to some ladies who had written a book, and we were talking about a particular, just not necessarily a handicap, but particular issue, and the woman, she said, you know what, everybody's dealing with something, everybody's got some limitation, everybody's got some problem, and you don't know. Sometimes we think we're the only one with a particular problem, or that whose health isn't perfect or whatever. And then once we share it, people are like, oh, well, I got this problem too. You know what I mean?
Sure. No, that's 100% true. And, it's also one of those things you always look at, like, oh, look what they have. And, I remember showing my dad a house, probably in Hinsdale right next to it. And he's like, oh, that's great. He goes, but someone's probably looking at your house right now saying, I wish I lived in that house. And it's all relative sometimes. You always aspire for certain things, but, basically it's sometimes be happy with what you have. And there's nothing wrong with, obviously having goals and wanting things better and stuff, but sometimes you have to realize what you have. And,
yeah.
So
well said. I don't think there's an issue with aspiring to have more, but it is a great value to be content with what we have and, measure backwards. I mean, that's another whole side trail, but I always tell people, and, I learned it. I didn't develop it. I learned it. But, when we measure backwards. You don't measure into the future because the future is an abstract. So if you're always aspiring to something new or some horizon, like that's an abstract. As a human, we can visualize it because we have that capability. But like measuring progress, well, I started in this apartment and then I went to this ranch house and then I went to this bi-level and then I went to this, like, you're like, oh, I don't have the mansion yet and I want one. But,
yeah,
so we always measure backwards. So that's a good perspective. Anyway, I digress. So that's fascinating. So you had this great sales training, you said, with basically the, Gallo products. And then you transitioned to Doralco. But did you know anything beyond what you knew about the trainers or whatever? Did you know anything about architectural products or materials or fabrication or anything?
No, I mean, I'll be the first to say I'm probably, my family laughs at me, like, if there's an issue, like, oh, are you calling Uncle Joe to come over and help? I'm like, no, I can change a light bulb. Or I have a story that I love. It's one of my favorites. I was working at Doralco in the summer, or probably trainer actually, and I was having lunch with some of the guys from the shop, and they always were nice to me, and they ripped me as a college kid, whatever. And I opened up my lunch, and the guy said, "Hey," he goes, "Oh, did you peel your orange at home?" And I'm like, "No, my mom peeled my orange for me." And that was the worst thing to say. I mean, they just had a field day with it. But so more joking, like I was not definitely the most architecturally, or I'm not the most mechanical type person, but by any means. And so it's amazing that I'm in the construction industry. Now, I probably don't give myself enough credit. I mean, I've obviously learned, and I know my product. I know a lot of things about it, but there's so many more people that know a lot more. And I always aspire to know more, and I'm always impressed with. There's certain people in the industry that are really good at the technical side and the sales side, and I would love to have a little bit more of that. And then and it's hard to find. The people that can talk technical, and someone wants to listen to them talk technical. Sometimes people just can go off on a tangent. They're like, "Oh, I just asked a simple question, and you want." So yeah. But no, I did not have the architectural background, or other than me working in the summer type of thing.
Well, I want to unpack this a little bit more, though, because there's obviously there's something in your being, in your DNA, in your person. So you knew the trainers. You went into the sales position, then you went into Doralco. You weren't a mechanics guy, like you weren't. Dan Shields working at a CNC equipment or sweeping floors or whatever. So do you like the challenge of problem solving? Do you like the beauty of architectural componentry? Do you like the client relationship aspect? Or is it just really a blend of all things? Do you just like solving problems, creating solutions? Like, what is it that pulled you in, that attracts you, that made this? Because something is there. You've been at it a long time.
I mean, I obviously I like to say a blend of all those, but I mean, where I feel like I probably have done well is I've really hustled. I travel a ton. I still do. And I mean, I would take 20 trips a year, sometimes more, and I'd go see everybody. And it wasn't easy back when I first started, and you go around, and aside of that, year after year when I was there, Trainer kept expanding to every different market. And so, they were my sister company, and I had to explain that, where, I'd be in a market, and, I'd have to overcome that. And so I had to build a trust and a friendship, and, and you hear people always talk, you're selling to friends. And I really do feel like I've gotten to that point where I'm in a spot now where I'm fortunate to, I try to respect my client's time and try to set up some appointments. But other times it's like, depending on what I'm going out to a market for, I may just reach out, like, "Yeah, come on in, Tom." Or I have some people I just meet instead of go to their office, like, we'll meet for coffee, or meet for a beer, or meet for lunch, whatever. And so I really do like the client side of it. I like building that relationship and fostering it with not only that person and maybe the other people in their office, or people shuffle and move around companies, and I like to then follow them around, and keep maintaining the other relationship I had at the other company. And yes, I mean, I feel like I've been fortunate. When I was at Doralco, we did a lot of custom things, and we had a wide variety of products. We had the door rails, and then we went into sunshades, and then we went into panels. And now while I never liked panels, we did them and so forth. And when we started Clover, same thing. Like, people come to us for some kind of wacky stuff. We like doing the really standard stuff, but we get brought into other things. So I like when my team can come up with a solution, or that someone thinks enough of us, like, "Oh, we got this job, call Tom." And, we'll come up with a way to do it, and we'll find a solution. And so it's probably a mixture of all those things. John, probably is probably what has drawn me into this and kept me going in it.
That's fantastic. How much do you still travel, and how much is virtual now versus face-to-face?
I don't do a lot of virtual. I do most of my stuff isn't in face-to-face. I'll probably do 20 trips a year probably. And it's still like, so I haven't traveled a lot this summer. I have 2 kids going off to college. So I did a couple things in June, nothing in July. And then also, I think people get busy in the summer. They don't want to see you. And so after I take one daughter goes off to St. Louis University. The other one's going off to University of Virginia, based both the same day. And then after that, I'll get back on the road. But I don't have a rep network really. I have 2 or 3 reps I work with. So it's really, I'm the rep type thing. And I think a lot of people like that, that they're dealing direct with us, or the team. I mean, when I say us, it's not just me, it's everyone here. But I do feel like there's a value there. And I know a lot of people have said, oh, with Zoom, you don't have to go do this and all that. And believe me, there's a truth to a lot of that. I feel like if you sometimes out of sight, out of mind, and I've gone in places and they're like, oh, I forgot you did that. I'm like, okay, yeah. So I like it. I like getting out there, and it's don't get me wrong, it's getting harder as I get a little bit older, and I'm my family doesn't like traveling with me because I could be grumpy, and I probably let the small things bother me because you've dealt with so much. Now some people could say, well, then you've dealt with so much that shouldn't bother you anymore, but you just it's just small things. And but no, I mean, I'm fortunate that I don't really have to take direct flights out of Chicago, so I can, it's easier, and I'm pretty set in my ways. I try to travel just American Airlines, so there's some benefits there, and I try to stay in this, 1 or 2 hotel chains, so I get used to where I'm staying. So travel's gotten easier, and I don't feel like I'm in a spot where I'm having to do as much cold calling. Where where when I first started out, I'd see 7 or 8 people a day if I had to, and without Waze or whatever maps, Google Maps, and I had an Atlas book, and I remember one time I made the wrong turn and I went over the Brooklyn Bridge twice, and it took me an hour to get a mile to my hotel. So, but I was always proud of myself when I made it, and there was also a time I think when I'd be leaving somewhere and the client would ask me where I was going next, and I'd hesitate. They're like, oh, I don't care who you're seeing. I'm assuming you're seeing my competitors, but I'll tell you how to get there. And I always appreciated that they were trying to help me out. And, and so, that's the other thing. I think our industry is a great group of people. Yeah. I go back to when we started the company, people helped us out. And I think it's I've said this before, that either people worked at a startup themselves, or they started their own company and they remembered what people did for them. And, I've joked several times, some of the initial projects we got, my parents would give me those jobs. And am I you sure? They're like, no, we trust you. And so, but yeah, so it's on the travel side, it is mostly in person. And if need be, our team here does a lot more Zoom meetings on projects once we get them. And so, but yeah.
That's convenient. That's good to know. Thank you. So then talk to me about Clover Architectural, because you are a managing partner at Clover Architectural, right?
Correct.
And how did that form? What was the formation of that like? I mean, you are an owner of the business, right? So
correct. So there's a couple of us, yeah.
Yeah. And how did that transition? Was this always a desire? Was it a natural progression? And what does Clover do?
Sure. So no, it was not on my radar. And when Trainer Glass went bankrupt, they had tied Doralco down because the owners of the 85% of Doralco had pledged their shares to the bank, and also put us up as part of their performance bond. So they couldn't be sold. And so they had to kind of wait for the whole global settlement to happen. And someone had approached me about looking at Doralco. I had, met with them and had breakfast, explained I own 5%. I have no say in what's going on. And they said, hey, that's kind of a mess you're in the middle of. And I said, yes, I'm aware. To get out of it. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Thanks for the feedback, right?
Correct. Yes. And it was hard. I had 3 kids in private Catholic school, and, it was 43, perfect time to start your own business, right? And so after that meeting, one of the guys there, who's kind of the guy that would find deals for these guys, Ed Carney, said, he called me up, and turned out he lived in the same town as I did, and we knew some of the same people. And he's like, hey, they're not interested, but I may know some people that if you want to start something from scratch. And I said, perhaps. And, so we talked a little bit, and took about 6 months, and the initial backer kind of fell apart, and I'm like, all right, just gonna move on and see what happens. And then he's like, I got another backer. I'm like, oh, well, who? And he's like, my brother. I'm like, okay. So it turned out his brother's a great guy, Tom Carney, and he was very successful in the real estate development of apartments and managing them around the country. And so him and another guy, Bill Callahan, kind of helped fund our company to get started. And then we brought in Jim Stromplewski, and so and that's kind of how it got started. It was we all kind of took a chance, and Ed didn't really have much of a background in construction. He was in the banking industry for a long time, and so no, I mean, it was the last thing on my mind. And my wife Lorraine was great about saying go for it, and and believing in me to do that. And I'm sure she was nervous about it too, but she knew I was ready for a change. I didn't like what was going on in my former company, and I didn't want to be part of that. And I knew I had to do something, and I knew I could probably get some other jobs, but it was funny. Like, people either wanted me to move when I was talking to some other companies, and I didn't want to move my family. I was from here, her family's here, my family. And so it's one of those things. And once you did leave, more opportunities came up, and you're like, oh, well, it's hard to just quit something thinking you're going to get something. But 9 years later, I couldn't be happier. We did what we did. And to kind of expand about that, we were really fortunate. So when we started the company, and for the first 8 years until we bought a company last August, Clover was a metal fabricator who didn't fabricate a thing. So we worked at the company called Circle Metals. Mike and Rob Mishka were people I grew up with and knew them, and I started asking him about saws, and Mike asked if I wanted to borrow his table saw for the weekend, and I'm like, no. I started explaining a little bit more, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. And we had a couple lunches, and he said, hey, we'd like to fabricate it for you, so you don't have to go get a shop, or at least you don't have to jump into it. And that's what we did, and we continued to do it because they do a fantastic job for us. And so we sell a job, and we do the drawings in house, and we outsource the engineering, and then once we get the job, we order the material, we cut the dies ourselves, we take care of any fasteners. And then Circle Metals will cut it, put it together. And then if we have to get some other parts and pieces made, we'll do that and get it over to them. And then we take care of shipping, any post-finishing that needs to be done. And so initially people are like, oh, you're a broker. I'm like, no, we're not a broker at all. I mean, we're not fabricating it, but we're doing everything else. And, so it's not like we're just writing them a PO and they're cutting the dies and doing all those things. So we kind of knew where you had to be competitively. And so that's kind of how Clover, and then we have 4 or 5, 6 other companies that we work with from time to time for different parts and pieces. And but for the most part, they're our main partner. And then we bought another company last August, American Custom, and American Custom was a local guy in New Lenox, Illinois, and the owner, Bill Anisich, stayed on with us, and he will for a little bit, a while longer. And he had a great reputation. He does brake metal, and he does interior fin tube covers, and he was doing our cladded doors. We were a big customer of his, and he had approached us before, and so we kind of revisited that. And so we fabricate now, but most of the stuff we don't. We still do it the way we were doing it. So
you still have you owned all the risk. You own all the risk, all the
correct
intellectual property and designs. You have a primary fabricator and half a dozen other suppliers of different things. But now you're also doing some direct fabrication, but you're not doing your whole volume.
Correct. It's a very small portion of what we and that's our plan for right now. I mean, we're not looking. It's worked great, and it's that they have a great facility and they have a great team, and they're very well known. They do a lot of work for a couple of really large glazing contractors, and then they do a lot in the Chicagoland area too for a lot of other glazing contractors. So they do a lot of steel and steel trusses and all that good stuff, and they've just really been a great partner of ours.
That's really great. It's funny. Just every time I talk to the Chicago area is so prolific because I talked to Kevin Carey, who's in Texas now. I'm talking to you. I've talked to Dan and others, and I have a whole group. So my mother and my father are both from Hinsdale.
Okay.
My mother's dad, John Lane, he was a constable in DuPage County back in the day. She had 4 siblings. Her sister married a guy, and they took up residence in New Lenox. Okay. So you're talking about New Lenox. And I was just talking to 2 of my cousins, one yesterday, one today, and they're in Manhattan, New Lenox, that whole region there, the whole crew of them. And part of it for me is it's almost like a flashback to like, I got to get back to Illinois and see some family,
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
That's great. So American Custom Fab, I didn't know that. That's really cool. So did you feel that there was a strategic component to that though, for adding it to the kind of Clover family?
Yeah, the thing we really like about it, and that we were doing a lot of, is these interior fin tube covers. And like the first time we sold one was probably 5-6 years ago. We did Children's Hospital in Philadelphia with Harmon, and we bid it, and then the guy came back and said, "Well, they sent a detail after we got it." He's like, "Well," I'm like, "Well, there's slots in here," and he's like, "Yeah, it's a fin tube cover." Like, well, the other detail didn't have any, and he's like, "They all have them, Tom." And I, of course, I looked it up. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, they do." Like, so I joked with Jim Bald. I said, I don't even know what I sell sometimes, but we did. It was fine. We were able to make that work, and that was our first one, and it was a big job. It was like $500,000 of fin tubes, and
wow.
And then we started doing some others for some other people, and we just did a big one up in Boston, and we're doing one in Michigan, and we have 2 here in Chicago, and so it's starting to become more repetition, and people are recognizing we're doing it, or they're coming back for their second or third job with it. And what we found is when the glazers get it in their package, which is not often, they don't really want to work with the mechanical companies. They're great. Those companies are great companies, but they're not used to working with the glazers, and maybe like, hey, this piece has to be this size, and everyone has to be different size, and they don't want that. They want probably more consistency of what they're doing, and I'm not saying that they don't have jobs that have some, variation on the mechanical side, but I think just felt more comfortable dealing with us, and we could offer it. So we really felt like that was a product that we could definitely grow more around the country. The other stuff they do a lot of brake metal and stuff like that, and we have a couple of retail clients we do stuff for that we make like point of purchase displays and stuff outside the construction industry. Really, it was really that product that we felt we could do more with, and kind of grow that.
Interesting. I got 100 questions, so I got it. So Tom and Ed and Bill, like, were they active partners or just investors?
So Tom and Bill were just we were just investors, and then Ed is daily, and so is Jim daily. So Jim heads up operations. Ed handles. So Ed and I are co-managing partners. Ed is handles more of the back office, and he helps out on the door side, some order entry, all the billing and all that stuff on there, more of that side. So
yeah, anybody that owns or is part owner in a business, I just again, this thing's coming to my mind. Can we understate can we overstate the importance of the back office? I mean,
yes,
that does not run smoothly. Cash flow, billing, general ledger, bank relationship, accounting, HR. I mean, unbelievable. Like, if I couldn't do what I do, I mean, my partner is dealing with all that now. It's just, I shout out to everybody that runs the back office. I call it the spine of the organization. It's like the neural network center.
Well, 100%, John, because there's plenty of customers that we've dealt with that either they don't pay their bills, or you talk to people on their, so Ed's really good about, we make sure we pay all our bills, and he tries to do most in 30 or under. Everyone else is 40 or under. And I can't tell how many times, like, we're out trying to collect money and he does all that. And sometimes I'll jump in, like, if I know someone and we're going over, I'm like, let me make a call. But no, there's people I know that work at places and they're like, I can't even get caulk, or I can't go to Home Depot and pick up some wood for this because we don't have any money to pay it, or we're late with everybody. And, there's nothing more frustrating with, companies that just pay late just to pay late versus ones that maybe are, companies run into financial struggles and they're just waiting on some things, and that's understandable. And we try to be understanding of that. Where if our client is telling us, hey, this is where we're at, like, okay, great, just let us know, and we'll work with you.
Right.
And, we're pretty easy. We don't do if I probably shouldn't say this in case there are bankers listening. We don't do really credit checks. We kind of go off of, Tom, who are these people? Who are you selling to? And, every once in a while there's people I don't know. And, it's someone that came to us and either as a lead from someone else and you're taking a little bit of a flyer, but we really haven't been burned. So, and for the most part, you can control a little bit of that with material going out and stuff. But some jobs are real quick and, material comes in, goes out, and you're kind of on the hook for all of it. But
right.
But to your point, the back office is the heart of the company a lot of times. So
yeah, I always say back office typically won't. I mean, they're not front facing. They typically won't win a customer or acquire a customer, but they sure can tick them off and lose them.
Sure,
we've had that recently where a collections process was misapplied. And I mean, we're not going to lose a $250,000 relationship over a $27 finance charge. It's like, oh my gosh. But yeah, shout out to the back office. So Clover, a little bit more about your product then. So is Clover making architectural specialties, panels, like everything related to, or is it sunshades, fin tubes, things like that are on the exterior of a building that are attached to the curtain? What all are you doing?
Sure. So our main product line, I would say, would be the sunshades, and that would be either it could be a vertical perforated fin, it could be a solid fin, it could be an airfoil extrusion, with 4 airfoils and a fascia. It can be something that we just did a crazy job in Cambridge called 40 Thorndike that was insane. These units were like 15 foot tall, 10 foot wide, and had these tapered 1/2 plate, 1 inch plate fin, like outriggers. So people think of us for custom things, and so we'll do all sorts of sunshades. And that can, like I say, can involve perforated metal being used either horizontally or vertically. It can be a lot of different things. Then we also do a lot of garage screening. So we'll take a perforated panel and frame it up. We'll bend it up into different shapes and then frame it. We'll do like an expanded metal. We'll do corrugated, perforated. So we'll do a lot of things like that. And then we also do a lot of cladded doors. So we'll take a storefront door and clad it in brass or bronze or munts and things like that. And then we've done a couple really high-end glass handrails. So like 7-foot windscreens on. We did a really big one in Chicago, 110 North Wacker. We did a big one in Boston. We've done some high-end glass canopies. We did the McDonald's new headquarters. We did all the steel. We did all the glass. Bought all the fittings, but we provided the glass.
You did provide all the glass.
We did, yes.
Everything, the whole kit.
Yeah. So
wow.
When we bought that glass, I told Garrett Henson, I can't believe I'm not being wined and dined for the $20,000 in glass I bought. So you said,
that was a big order at Viracon, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, I think they had to shut everything down to run it, but so stuff like that. And then we have our interior division. We'll do rails for all glass doors. So we do the rails, the header bars, side lights. We prep it for all the different hardware. We don't make our own hardware, but we'll prep for the different, closers and arms and pivots. So we have a whole line of customers that buy that from us.
Wow.
And with the, and then we'll get into some custom fab, some crazy stainless steel fabrication and things like that. So, and one of the reasons that people come to us is because we haven't had our own shop is we don't say, well, we don't have that machinery, we can't do it. We're like, well, I know who has that machinery. I can get you what you want. And the customer doesn't care. The law that get them what they want and it's the price they need it at, we'll do it. We did some 22-foot individual fins with crazy cutouts at Western Michigan University, and it was a really cool job to be part of, and no one else was able to do it. Everyone else is going to have to break it apart, and so we had a resource that could do that for us, and that's what we did. And so we've done a couple jobs like that. So we're not afraid to obviously get it done. Buy the material, get it done somewhere else, and but yeah. So that's kind of our breadth of products.
That's really good to know. It's fascinating that you have this. You make a really good point. There's pros and cons to having, let's say it's horizontally integrated. There's pros and cons to having all of that. But that is a really good point. You're not obliged, other than your American Custom Fabricator, which already had its product line, you're not obliged to have to fill certain equipment types, certain amounts of time with certain limitations, and then try to force that into the shop. You're able to follow the customization and pivot and work with the spreader. That's a really good point. So that's a real asset, really, to have that network.
No, it's been great. We've been fortunate. A lot of these people realize we only come to them every once in a while for some of the products, but they're still really good to us about it. And others are really appreciative that we're putting work in their shop, and they wouldn't have the contacts to go get this business. So they're happy to get the business we're giving them. And there's always a worry, like, hey, I'm going to give this guy business. Is he going to go try to take my customer? And, I put the name of our customers on our websites, and people are like, oh, you shouldn't do that. I'm like, if we're doing our job, I don't, one, I want to brag that who we're doing work with. And two, if we're doing our job, then they'll come back to us. And, and that's just, and it's not like it's top secret who the best glazing contractors are. It's out there, and then on the websites and the lists from, the U.S. Glass and Glass Magazine, they all list it. And,
No, that's a good point. It's not, if you can't do the research and figure it out, it's not like it's a big secret,
Well, no.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. We're working on a thing in New York right now. I have a New York entity, and one of my consultants and I were working on a thing with a collaborative partner there. Just similar thing, but in professional services. And, you're a good example of, what Seth Godin would call the shared economy, the sharing economy. Like, hey, I can't do this, but you can, but I could sell that and you can't, but you can ship that, but I can, and you're building this collaborative network. And, it's not a like, well, if I get a bigger piece of the pie, you get a smaller piece. No, you can get a bigger pie. Like, you can grow the pie, right? That's a really great example. And you've been doing it for a while. Too bad you didn't write the book and coin the term. You could have really done well. Put on the $1 Million Seminar. So, okay. So have you seen any trends? So you talked about, starting at Doralco, you started seeing sunshades, and you did sunshades, and now you're doing all these custom sunshades and all these various types. Have you seen any trends in the industry, with LEED buildings, with energy improvements, with energy mandates, with architectural? Certainly you have to, taking your network, your customer base, and you're seeing this feed that is informing you. So what kind of trends have you seen? What kind of trends toward innovation or development?
I would say we probably don't get as many trends in what we do as compared to a lot of in the glazing side, where like the different types of glass, whether it's, the UV values or the bird friendly and all those things that people are seeing. I would say we're seeing more, vertical applications of sunshades being used a lot more than ever before. So we are seeing a lot more of that. We're seeing a lot more of the wood grain finishes being used. So that's a powder coat going on that looks like wood, and that's becoming a lot more prevalent than ever before. Those are probably a couple of the things that we've seen on our end from there. We don't, on the LEED side, we always have to, submit the different LEED, but it seems like that never, at least our stuff is probably so small in the grand scheme of the project. Like, they ask for what they can get out of us, but so it's one of those things that even way back when when I was at Doralco, we started looking at PV sunshades, and everyone thought, oh, that'll be the rage. And, and it just, no one wanted to plug it in. And it was always like, well, I have this, and I'll get this. And so, yeah, we're probably in a little bit outside of that. But as far as like what we see sunshade wise, we are definitely seeing a lot more vertical sunshades running up the building, and a lot more of the wood grain type of application.
Well, no, so you are seeing, trends. So those are two trends. Do you think the wood grain, does that at all correspond with like mass timber, or the no correlation?
I don't think any correlation with it, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah. And have you seen I know the market's up and down and stuff, but do you see a continued steady increase in sunshade applications and the use of sunshades? And is it more around the country than it used to be, or is it primarily in the West, or what do you see there? Anything at all?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's all over. It's definitely still, it's something that, we're fortunate being based in the middle of the country that we are competitive shipping all over the country, and we've got some pretty good relationships in California and Hawaii and Texas,
wow,
to the Northeast, to the Southeast. And what I would say is we're busier than ever bidding, but it seems like at a stage right now where a lot of things aren't being awarded, or they're going out for the second and third round again, which we hadn't seen that in a long time. And in certain markets like Washington, D.C., where I feel like they never slowed down, or Texas, both of those seem like they're slowing down a little bit. And, which a little bit concerning. But then, honestly, the last couple of weeks, it seems like things are picking back up again. And we've kind of been, I'd say, a little bit more energized with that. We had a couple projects that canceled because of budgets, and one job just got completely, we may be back on it. They're revamping it. These are pretty big projects, for us, but they also were pretty big projects that, one's at a major university that I was kind of surprised it wasn't all worked out ahead of time, and, funding wise, and it wasn't like they were over budget by $1 million. It was like $20 million over budget. And wow. It was hard to believe they even got to that point, like someone was awarded and then they had to kind of backtrack it. So, and from talking to some other vendors and some clients, like everyone else has kind of seen a little bit of that. But honestly, the last couple of weeks, we definitely have felt a little bit more energized with that. So,
that's interesting. We are completely parallel, but and I don't know if it's coincidental or not, but same thing here. Like before I got on this, I was finishing the 5th of 7 proposals that we're working on in the last week. And there was more turn. On the other hand, our estimated work scorecard keeps going up. Like it's increased by about $500,000 or $600,000. But I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, because things aren't turning. Like, to your point, things aren't turning. So like, in 2018, you've got this large volume of estimated work and things are turning, and you can barely keep up, and then stuff's still coming through the front door. Right now, it's just coming in. They're like, okay, well, here's one coming out. So getting those, and I'm also seeing, I have a couple of big jobs quoted, but I'm also seeing a lot more. To quote $300,000 in work, I'm working on 15 or 20 jobs, not 2 jobs, Yeah. So sounds like some similar trending, and even in the last couple of weeks, some things picking up. That we're in the midst of new energy mandates that have been put in place. Local 197 in New York City, owners have to bring their facades up. It's the most, unless Massachusetts wants to claim it now, but the Mass Energy Code has just been put in place July 1. So there's all kinds of different requirements now for U-values for exterior walls and solar shading, and as part of that strategy. So it'll be interesting to see what you see. I know insulated glass is a big part of that too, and mechanical systems and lighting, but people underestimate. I think a lot of owners think about, or they're sold a bill of goods about the mechanical system, but if you don't replace your glass and you don't get a thermally broken system and you don't put some solar shading in place, you're really going to hurt yourself.
Well, for sure. Yeah. You'll either have trouble renting the place because people aren't going to renew their lease, and, you'll have a vacant building pretty quick.
So let me ask you about how you deal with things you've never seen before. In other words, and if I'm putting you on the spot, just say, it's fine. So you go to a client, they show you something like these 22-foot long fins or the 15-foot tall by 10-foot wide. How do you approach that innovation? Like you're receiving a request for a certain type of product. Are you just going out then and, I mean, you may not agree with this, but you seem like a master networker. Like, are you going out and deploying all your contacts to try to bring something together? How do you approach that?
Yes, no, and that's exactly what I would do there. Is what I would do is look at it. I'd grab Warren Hagee, who does all our estimating and who allows me to go do what I do. He's phenomenal what he does, and he's an estimator, and almost like going back to the back office thing, he makes everything happen. And I always joke, like I used to do all my own takeoffs, and I would back in the day at Doralco, and but I'll do a takeoff sometimes, hand it to Warren, and we'll price the job, and I'll say, hey, did you use my takeoff? And he's like, no. And then he'll throw me a ball and say, well, I use parts of it, Tom, just to make me feel better. But
I've heard the same thing. Yeah.
So I'll grab him, and we'll go through, and I'll look at it, and I'll say, hey, what do you think? How are we going to get this done? Or who can we go to? Or I may be 2 steps ahead and already send it ahead to someone else who I think can do it. Or if need be, we'll get it, like an engineer involved, and this is what we have to do. And so we definitely never want to say no. We're one of those companies that, like, especially if it's a good client and they're coming to us, we feel like we owe them to come up with something because they owe their client something. And that's how we've been able to build our business, is being a resource and finding solutions for our clients. And, most of our business is repeat clients, and we're very fortunate there. And a lot of companies have that. We're not the only company that has obviously repeat clients, but, we want to definitely be thought of as just thought of as a problem solver and not just a vendor to them, that they're buying, bits and pieces from. It's, we definitely have, like we have partners that help us get things done, that they're part of our team. They're not just a vendor to us. And, so yeah, that's what we would do. We would start figuring out how we can get it done, who the best fit would be. We may talk to a couple people and get their, thoughts as well. And like, hey, can you do this? And, because obviously at the end of the day, it's got to come down to price. And, some people can do it, but it just may cost an arm and a leg, and other people may have a better angle at it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. I think when I hear you, there's a lot of different ways to solve problems. You can solve problems. I guess whatever skills we have are the ways we engage to solve problems and to develop product. I was just listening again to it. Everybody knows this probably, but the only college class that Steve Jobs was interested in was calligraphy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Steve Jobs, that's the only, like, he didn't want to go, like, what am I here for? And when him and Gates were on the cover of Wired or Tech or whatever it was, MS had their desktop product and Apple was coming out with their. Jobs was like, we can't just have one font. Like he wanted the artistic. He said, this is art. This is a piece of art. And my point to that is, Gates looked at, and he was wildly successful, and so was Jobs. Gates looked at products in a certain way, and Jobs, and they both brought their unique ability, their unique problem solving to the table. And one appealed to the more creatives, and one appealed to the more producer type people, and they were both successful, but they both brought their own unique solution set and background. And Jobs, he just wanted to make beautiful products.
Yeah. No, you're 100% correct. I mean, there's, in any of these things, it's a team effort, and there's different, like my job. A lot of people don't want to go do my job. Like, I can never go see clients. I can never get on a plane and go do what you do. And I'm like, I can't do what you do. I can't put together you do this and that. Like, So, and that's why, if you get the right team, it works well together. You split it up.
One quick question I've been wanting to ask, only for the road warriors or the future world warriors, or for the young person listening, or for the salesperson who's maybe frustrated. Give me, on your 20 trips or your 15 trips, give me your typical week. You leave Monday, come back Thursday. You leave Tuesday, come back Wednesday. You visit, like, you're on 24 hours while you're there. Like, what are you doing?
Sure. So I normally try to take the earliest flight out on like a Tuesday typically.
Okay.
And if I'm going out west, it might be 3 nights. If I'm going anywhere else, it's typically 2 nights. So I try to catch like a 6 a.m. flight, and then I typically try to have 3 to 4 appointments lined up, and then openings for a couple others, if need be that day, of other people that I know in the market. And I try to do a dinner if I can. I try to do lunch if I can. Sometimes I'll drive through lunch to the next spot because, more and more people are getting busier. Or, some people want to go to lunch, some people don't. But so I try to do 4 to 5 people a day minimum. And then if I can fit in a couple extra, I will. And then I do that on a Tuesday, the same thing on a Wednesday. And again, if I can grab dinner with someone, or a beer after work, or, a cup of coffee in the morning, I try to do that. And then Thursday, see some people. I tend to take a little bit earlier flight back on a Thursday. I'm not catching like the 7 or 8 o'clock. But, I want to get back, see the family and things like that. I try to coordinate around my kids' activities and stuff. I'm big about, I know if people see me, they're like, you got to be kidding me, but I am really big about working out on the road. And I do, like, so on Tuesday, if I get to the hotel and I'm not going out to dinner, I'll go right down to the hotel gym. And then Wednesday morning, I get up and go to the hotel gym. And same thing Wednesday afternoon if I can, depending what's going on. I do that just it's a good stress release, and it makes me feel better. It's amazing how many people don't work out on the road. I very rarely can I not get on a machine, except for when I don't have enough time. Then there's always someone taking their time on the machine ahead of me. But so those are really important things for me to do on the road. I'll when I'm at the hotel, I'm I'll either watch something, I'll just unwind. I'll do a little bit of work. And I'm not someone that's going to work all night when I'm sitting. I try to, maybe I'll catch a show. I'll catch up on emails. If I have to send some bids out or quotes out to help get some things done, I'll do that. And then, I might watch something on like my iPad or something like that, read a book. And I don't get into, I like history and some things about people, but I'm also, sometimes I'm big on just something simple, like a John Grisham book that I can just, lose my mind in. Yes, it's simple, but it keeps your mind. I'm not going to tell you I'm reading a 7,000 page war book or on General Patton or something. But so yeah, that's kind of what the routine is. And again, depending on where I'm going, I might see 10 to 12 people in that week. And it's a mixture of glazing contractors. Sometimes it's an architect. It could be, a metal panel guy. So it's kind of a good mix of those types of things. And I also try to, when I can, if I can catch up with like an old college buddy or someone that I knew that moved out of town, try to meet up with them from time to time. And, my wife always laughs because then when people come to town, I'll say, oh, so-and-so's downtown, and she's like, oh, what time are you going to meet him? I'm like, no, I don't feel like going down. She's like, are you kidding me? Everyone goes to meet you. I'm like, yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get better about that, but
you know what? Thank you for that. That's really fascinating to hear. I share your and I'm not I work out 7 days a week. I don't over work out as it, but I have to do it to get my mind. Yeah, I've got a routine. People that know me know I've got a routine. And I say the quietest place in the morning in a hotel is the workout room, right? Like I'm in there a lot of times. I'm the only person in there. And I love it because, like you say, you get to the right place. And if there's not a good workout room and usually there's multiple hotels side by side, I'll just, walk around the lot. I'll go to the room and do push-ups. I'll do stretches. I'll do different things. But I share that with you. But I joke that, those rooms aren't that big generally because they are very quiet in the morning. I like to get up, get moving, get at it early. And So that's really helpful. And seeing 4 to 5 people a day, that's still a pretty good pace. Sometimes that's hard to do. I've kind of narrowed down mine to maybe 4 a day, but I used to try to get in more. And sometimes it's just a little crazy. You're just rushing from person to person. So that's great. For me, when I'm really checked out and really need to detox, the book is a Lee Child book, A Jack Reacher, which is about as shallow of a novel as you can read, but Jack's a cool dude, carries a toothbrush and throws his clothes in the trash when they're dirty. I like it.
Yeah.
He's like the ultimate nice guy. So that's really good. I was also, you mentioned one final question before we start to wrap here. I was wondering about architects. So you do call on and visit architects. Is that because they've asked you for some help or because you're trying to get in a spec?
It's probably a little bit of both. And so I've been doing this thing called ArcUS for probably 11 or 12 years. And it's, we do one-on-one meetings with architects and I typically pay for like 12, but I always get like 15 meetings and it's only a Thursday to a Sunday and it's either in nice resort in California or Florida. They flip-flop every year. But that's where I've gotten to know a lot of people. And our first job at Clover was a guy from Corrigan Architects calling me, from my past relationship with him. And then we jumped in and helped him out from there. So at Clover, we've had to kind of build back up those architectural relationships that I probably had before when I was at Doralco. And so more and more now we're getting into more specifications. So someone might be calling me about a project. So I'm kind of going to see them about that, or I'm just checking in with them to see what their next project might be. And, we've been fortunate. So that some of the guys at Gensler have been really good about getting us in their national specs. And what I've gotten out of that ArcUS is I've been able to reach out and say, hey, listen, I'm looking at a job in Texas. And, this guy might be in Washington, D.C. And he's like, enough said, Tom, I'll email the guy right now and I'll get you in the spec. And so it's things like that. That's what I get out of that going to that, that I want to call it speed dating, if you want to call it whatever. So it's a little bit more of that. We don't spend as much time as a lot of companies, and we definitely backdoor into most of our projects through, someone else doing the hard work. But we have several architects that we'll work with, and we always tell them, listen, we understand this doesn't mean we're getting the job because we're helping you out up front, but it enhances our chances of knowing about the job. If we're named the spec, people, if everything's equal, they're going to come to us over someone else, and that's all you can ask for. And like I said, I've definitely had enough jobs that we've earned that someone else did all the legwork on. So it should even itself out in the long run. But
yeah, you're right. It evens out. So that's fantastic. Believe it or not, an hour has passed, but we're not quite done yet because you already kind of segue. There's 100 more questions on the table. We could talk architecture and cladding and stuff, but on the personal side, you've already kind of foreshadowed some of that. But is there anything else like, you work out, you read, but routines, mindsets, any hobbies or recreation other than the things you've mentioned? Anything like you're like, oh, I always do this.
Sure. I love music. I don't get out to as many shows. I used to when I went to Indiana and Bloomington, they had a great live music scene. They had 4 or 5 bars that always had bands that would come for 2 or 3 days and play. And then every once in a while you'd get a little bit, a bigger guy coming through. And so and my roommates were always big into music. And so I really got into music from there. And then when I got out of college, I lived downtown for 12 years and, Chicago's got a great music scene. And I went down to Austin city limits when I turned 40 and we, was down there for a weekend. And so and my kids have a love of music now too. And so we'll sit around and play games and my daughters will throw on, or my son will throw on, playlists. And so I like the Lumineers, I'm big into them, and Mumford and Sons and Zach Bryan, and any type of music I like. I mean, I'll listen to country and that type of stuff. I like, some of the classic rock when I, was growing up, whether the Stones and things like that. I like to play golf. I used to run a ton, but I think I was telling you before, I had my knee scoped right during COVID and they took 70% of my cartilage out, so I can't run anymore. But I do, we have a treadmill in the basement so I can walk on it and, do some weights. And my oldest daughter always reminds me whenever I go to the sack, she kind of shakes her head, and so I walk away, and then I wait till she leaves. I go back where I was going to go. She's our healthy eater. She's the one that runs in college, and so she definitely watches what she eats. So my other activities are my kids. So my oldest daughter Maggie is gonna be junior in college, and she runs cross country and track. And my daughter Grace played volleyball last year in high school. She's going to college next year. And then my son Jack is gonna be a sophomore in high school, and he does lacrosse and football. And so I really do try to make all their games, and so I do try to do my schedule around that. My parents were great about being at all my games, and it's important to me. And last fall was tough because my daughter was playing volleyball, and she didn't start and she didn't play a ton, but I wanted to be at the games, and because I knew that chapter was ending for me, and I was able to work my schedule around that. And that to me was important, and kind of what you said before, like we were saying about seeing people. For 27 years, I've done a lot of legwork of knowing who the people are. So me having one fall of not getting out as much wasn't going to mean we weren't getting stuff coming in to bid on. So
right. Yeah, good point. Thanks for that. You're a busy guy. You exude a lot. It sounds like you exude a lot of energy. You're engaged in a lot of things. That's good. Kudos to you on being involved with your kids' stuff. Anything you want to say before we sign off? Anything you missed? Anything you like? Any words of wisdom or knowledge out there?
A few. I mean, I would like to say, like every success I've had, and not to sound cliche, but there's been so many people that have helped me along the way. There's been some phenomenal customers who take me under their wing and have gone out of the way to help me. And there's been a lot of mentors when I first started out, and they taught me some, at the time I didn't think they were great lessons, but they were giving me good lessons. I even go back to my days when I was selling wine, and I had a guy tell me, hey, it's 3:00 and you're done. You had a good week, and you could go home, or you could see that one extra client, and, maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. And, I kind of took that to my approach on the road, and I mean, no one knew what I was doing. I could have been back to the hotel at noon every day. And, but I'm like, I'll go see this one extra guy. And so I would say, do those things, take that extra, make that extra call, and put yourself in an awkward position. Like at BEC, when I used to go, I was the youngest guy out there, and it was the name tag days where like I was waiting to talk to someone, and I could have easily just went back to my room. Like, this stinks. Like I don't want to interrupt the conversations. You'd feel awkward waiting, but put yourself in an awkward position once in a while. It's worth it. And I also feel if you are out there traveling, the road warriors and stuff, take the time to see the city you're in. And I had a rep back in the day, and we were traveling, and he asked if I'd seen, like certain mountain range. I'm like, no. He's like, all right, let's go check them out. You got to check that. And that was important too. Like he's like, we've had a good day. I guess it's kind of reverse what I just said, but he's like, you need to see this too, because you're probably not getting back here. You need to see this. So I've tried to, blend, I do like to work hard and do those things, and I, probably, I expect others to do the same thing, but it is important to take a step back and realize how hard that you have worked, or that others have worked, and enjoy a little bit of that. So, yeah. Sorry about that. It's probably a little bit of a bumbling answer there, but
no, it's not. It's great. I share your view on that, and it is. Yeah, no, I get it. It all makes sense. It's all good. Wow. Well, we could go on a while, but we're done here. We don't want to wear out. I don't want to wear out BVS Productions that produce our podcast. Tom, thank you for being on. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, he is Tom O'Malley, managing partner of Clover Architectural Products. Did I say that right again?
Yes.
Clover Architectural Products. Thank you. And I'm John Wheaton, host of the Creating Structure podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. We are signing off.